Hi, welcome to another video. This video is about how to keep a reef tank regardless of the type of filter motion methods you decide to use. I hope you enjoy watching the coral and fragging images I put up for you whilst I talk to you about how to keep the aquariums that are featured in it. Now, when I say regardless of the type of filtration, by that I don't mean that you don't need a filter, but that these are the other important variables that need to be maintained in a reef tank. A lot of what I'm going to be talking about is also transferable to fish-only marine as well. So understanding the needs of the aquatic life you want to keep is the first place to start. So in this scenario, I'll focus on natural seawater or close to it. The first thing is salinity. Natural seawater is usually between 1.024 and 1.026. What I'd suggest is to pick a level and stick to it. If you can, use either an auto top up or replace the water daily so that you can keep the water at relatively the same salinity, because having it raise and lower continually really doesn't do anything good for the inhabitants. A consistent level will keep the stress to a minimum in the tank, and it's relatively easy to test daily, especially on smaller tanks where evaporation is likely to cause more fluctuations. The next levels to consider are pH, which the natural seawater level would be between 8.2 and 8.4, KH, where the level would be between 8 and 12, the calcium, where you'd expect natural seawater to be 400 to 450, magnesium, where you'd expect it to be 1250 to 1350, and strontium, which you'd expect that to be 10 to 14. Now, the way I go about keeping these levels is to calculate additives based on the usage and dose them daily. A constant level offers the inhabitants a much better chance to thrive than one that's always changing. For example, if you only dose calcium supplement once a week, then your tank would have a level of, say, 450 on the day you dosed it. However, when it comes back round to the day before dosing, the level could have lowered to, say, 400. Now, that inconsistency could have a detrimental effect on the coral over a period of time. And in my experience, it's much better to dose the additives on a daily basis, meaning that the total calcium or any other parameters you choose would remain consistent. If you check your water on a regular basis, you can amend the daily amounts to suit the usage. So if you find that it's still dropping a little bit, you can add a little bit more, depending on obviously what you're using to bring them up, whether you're using a reactor or you're just using simple powders or liquids. Whatever you're using, obviously you can adjust that to suit. Now, temperature. Natural seawater, you're probably looking at around 23 to 26. What I would do is try to go for a temperature that is easier to control. Don't fight the natural environment. Fill your tank up, allow it to come to a stable room temperature, then run your pumps and your lighting without the heater. Study the highest temperature it hits, so say check it throughout the day, see when it might peak. If it peaks at 25, then obviously don't try to set it at 23, because then you're just gonna naturally get fluctuations between sort of 23, 25 on a daily basis. If possible, I would say the best thing to do is to use a controller so that you're always keeping it at one temperature. There's plenty on the market, ones that alarm you if it's not right, something like that. Otherwise, check your temperature daily, make a note of it, and then if, say, for example, it reads 26 every day, and then all of a sudden one day it reads 25, you know to have a look what's going on and act upon that immediately. Nitrate. Now, nitrate, or otherwise referred to as NO3, ideally you're looking for 0, although you could go up to around about 20 as a safe level with some corals. There's really quite a lot of choices of ways to lower the nitrates and maintain a low level, which is maybe something we can talk about in another video. But for the purpose of this, whichever way you choose to do it, just test and feed accordingly. So in most of our tanks we choose to keep a range of corals, some of which won't survive long term with 0 NO3. This is how we keep our SPS, LPS and softies to happily living together. Long-term testing will guide you to the correct amount of dosing and feeding. So in the beginning, test the tank daily and feed the corals with something like aquavitro fuel and reef roids. That's our sort of ultimate mixture. Increase the amount you use every day until the first day you get an actual reading of NO3. Once you do get a reading, drop back to the previous day's dosage and then repeat this until you find a happy medium of feeding the maximum amount but leaving no surplus NO3. Following this, still test weekly to keep up with any coral growth that might change the amount you need to put in, but always spread the dose of any additives over the 7 days rather than letting the levels drop and peak. And you can do that with a doser or just manually putting it in. Either way, the corals will be much happier with these consistent levels. Next is phosphate, and usually you'd be looking for between 0 and 0.04. Again, there's plenty of options for keeping it low. What is key is testing to stop any sudden increase that can occur if your chemical removers or resins, anything like that, have exhausted themselves. So I'd recommend a weekly test just to keep this in check and just act upon any results that you do get that you didn't want. Very importantly for me, if you're going to use water changes, you need to know what you're putting in your tank. So what we would usually do is to test the tank water that is from the aquarium and test the new water before you use it. So many people won't even check salinity or pH or temperature before using new salted water. Honestly, this seems a bit crazy to me. It seems that on water changes, basic elements are just assumed to be correct, and it's hardly ever the case. So you don't need to guess, you can just test. So I'd probably estimate that testing these, if you was doing it on a weekly basis, a small weekly water change, probably cost you around £1, but it'll enable you to keep a stable environment, and then you can really pursue a proper dream reef that you've been looking for. Next is ammonia and nitrite. These really shouldn't be at play in a reef aquarium. If you add livestock at a slow rate, use bacterial products and good biological media to give yourself the basis for healthy bacteria to grow, that is the essentials of what you need. So you can check out my other video on maintaining media for more information on keeping your filter correctly, but always remember to keep checking your water parameters whilst making any changes such as adding fish or increasing foods. Also, check out my video regarding testing and recording, which is one of the most helpful things I can tell you about keeping any aquarium, because knowing what your tank actually runs at on a regular basis is powerful knowledge for keeping the inhabitants happy. Not a day goes by really that we're helping someone with an issue that they're trying to get to the bottom of, and you'll ask them usual questions such as maybe like what the temperature is, what the pH is, but if they're unaware of what the levels are a day ago, a week ago, or even a month ago, then you're not really going to be able to gauge as to whether something's been changing. So that makes it difficult to try and understand what problems have come about, because you can test them that day and you could say, oh yep, you've got a pH of 8.3, that's great, but if you're not testing consistently to see what it was last week or what it was the day before, then you're not really going to get an idea or a sense of what's really going on in the tank. So they're the principles of what we keep our reef tanks with, and as you can see, they are really successful and they house a full range of different types of corals. So what I would say is test, record and dose daily. Thanks for listening.